Welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens. This is Carly Stevens Books for all things writing, publishing, and indie author life. And I am so excited to have both members of the writing duo A.D. Rhine with me today. A.D. Rhine is the pseudonym of Ashlee and Danielle Stinson. The authors are united by their military quote-unquote brat upbringing and childhood friendship spanning 2 decades, as well as their shared love of gritty fantasy, historical fiction, and classical epics. I like those too, so this is gonna be fun. Their adult debut novel, Horses of Fire, is a historically rooted retelling of the Trojan War, coming to a bookstore near you on July 25th. So when this video goes live, that will have just come out. So definitely check it out, request it at your library, go to the bookstore, however you like to read. Daughters of Bronze, the second book in this epic duology, will also be published by Penguin Random House in 2024. When Ashlee and Danielle aren't using their kids' soccer practices as an opportunity to co-write their next novel from their minivans, so impressive, they're most likely making plans to escape across the country to visit each other. So again, thank you so much for being here, guys.
Thank you, Carly, for having us.
Yes, thanks for having us. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so
and I'm Danielle, and this is Ashlee.
Yes, just to clarify.
Yeah, I was about to ask you to, introduce yourselves and also explain how you began writing a book together. I see so many writing duos, and I am so curious about that whole thing. It's going to be mostly what we're talking about today, but how did you start writing together, and have you written anything on your own separately?
Yeah, so that is there is a story behind our story. So we met at 15 on a US military base in Germany. And so we have been passing notes to each other since the 9th grade, basically. So we have seen each other's writing in all its most embarrassing and wonderful forms. So we met when we were really young, and we were united by those experiences, and we've stayed in touch, and we bonded over, we love the same types of stories. So we bonded over those things, and we've remained dear friends since. But we always knew that we wanted to write, but we began writing separately. So we did individually. We were traditionally published, a combination of traditional and self-published, and mostly in the young adult space. I did science fiction. Ashlee was more a contemporary and historical. But we always knew from the time we were 15 that we were going to write together, and we were going to write a retelling of the Iliad, which really spoke to us as military brats, because in this in this epic of something that happened 3,000 years ago, that's mostly about a bunch of dudes killing each other, we were like, actually, this feels so relevant to us, because we saw so much in it that we could relate to our own lives, and also because there were big gaps in it, and it was in the gaps that we sort of saw where our experiences would fit in those of our mothers. And we were like, this is the story that we feel like this is what we can bring to this tale that is maybe different than what anybody else could bring to it. And so we always knew we were going to write it, but we
took some time.
Yeah. We decided to wait for the global pandemic to attempt that.
To actually dive into writing it together.
Yes.
So was it a message or something? Was it a text conversation that just spurred the actual writing of it one day, or was it something that had always been kind of ping-ponging in the back of your minds?
I think we've been talking about it. We've been talking about it for
decades.
Yeah, 10. Seriously talking about it for at least 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And there were a lot of, I think, contemporary events that really, the withdrawal in Afghanistan. We were seeing these images that felt like, okay, this epic war story that's thousands of years old. There are some themes and human experiences that are the same, and you continue to see them. And so I think that really lit a fire. We were like, this feels like the right time. And we started writing it during the pandemic. So it was let's escape to the Bronze Age.
To the collapse
of the Bronze Age.
Because that seems like a good time.
Oh,
let's homeschooling your children.
Yes.
Yeah, well, there's still an element of escape in there, at least.
Yes.
I remember reading the Iliad in school, and I taught it once, but it was a long time ago, and I remember the chapters when you're in Troy and you're meeting some of the women, Andromache in particular. I never was a big fan of Helen because I'm like, how I disliked Paris more because of all of the stuff he did, but I couldn't quite tell where Helen was in all of this. Anyway, all
Mhm.
this to say,
We took a
I
stance
was
on that.
We
So
did.
we took
We
a
were
stance
like,
on
we're
that.
sort
Yeah.
of tired of the women getting blamed for everything.
Yeah,
It seems to be the way. But yeah, we wanted to like go in there and kind of
yeah.
touch some things up.
Yeah, so that leads me into my next question, which is sisterhood is a big theme in your story. And I love that it's sisterhood. It's not the brotherhood that you normally get from this story, but it's sisterhood. Have your personal experiences as friends and as you say in your bio, those military brats, has that come into it? Um into the theme, the way you write about it?
Definitely. I think two things. I think it was, I mean, our senior year, we spent actually reading the Lord of the Rings trilogy, like on the couch together, like both of us had our
We
own
were
books.
so cool.
And yes, but we're
See,
sitting, so
women after my own heart.
yes, yes.
I
Yeah,
love
when
it.
we saw that you were a Tolkien fan as well, we're like, okay, we're gonna
We're
have
in a
some
safe
things to
space.
talk about.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think that was part of it, is like when we read it as, you know, a classic, we were thinking like this has the potential to be told in that epic fantasy style that we both just really love.
Mm.
It's that big of a story, and we feel like a modern audience might resonate with that, like approaching the story of the Trojan War through kind of that epic fantasy lens. Um, and then with our military brat backgrounds, I mean, I think like the first conversation we had when we were talking about writing this together, like when we were getting really serious about it, was in book 6 of the Iliad. There's like a famous farewell scene where you see Andromache and you see Hector and their son, and you know, Andromache and Hector are saying goodbye, and it's one of the most iconic scenes in the Iliad.
I
And
remember
that's,
being so moved, some the
Yeah.
helmet flashing and all that. Yeah.
yeah, and when
Yeah.
you said your goodbye to your father like that, or your spouse.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually right after my husband, we got married, and then less than 2 weeks later, he was deployed to Afghanistan. So when we were talking about these things, we are like, this is stuff that we feel like we've lived through in different
Yeah,
roles. Like first as a child, you see and you read through the lens of a child who might have experienced something like that, and then as a woman. So I feel like we're so glad that we actually waited to
Mm.
be where we are now, because we can bring so many different aspects of our experience. But yeah, that was a huge
yeah.
catalyst.
And we, you know, we saw in the Iliad, there is a servant who is in that scene, a servant girl, and she's holding Andromache's son. And we were just like, who is that person, who is that young woman? So I think that's where like some of the sisterhood aspect came in, of like, was she an important part of Andromache and Hector's life? So, you know, one of our characters in our version, it was kind of born from just questioning, like, who is this person? What would a relationship between these two women have looked like when, you know, literally their world's on fire and they're experiencing, you know, the collapse of their city and trying to save it. So that's kind of where it came from.
And one more thing, just like, because we've been friends for so long, and we, you know, within the course of our lifetime, there have been many conflicts that we've, you know, like when we were young, that you experience global politics through the lens of like a child, you know, seeing the results of it. But when you're older, and like she studied history, I studied international relations, we had all these ideas about like, okay, things that we want to infuse in this tale, along with our personal experiences. And just knowing when we did the research that when we were young, we always felt like the life that we had lived was a little bit invisible, because it's a very unusual, like, and we were so thankful for it. We found each other. There were a lot of strengths, but there's also like, not a lot of people know, you know, like you have all these Americans living abroad and being in different cultures. And it opened our eyes to see that there are so many different sides to every story, because history is really just a story that we're telling ourselves. And it depends on the perspective of the person who's telling it. So we were so taken by the late Bronze Age and this time, not just like the mythology written by Homer, who wrote about it hundreds of years actually after it probably happened, but as an actual historic event with people that actually lived it, and people that we didn't we don't know that much about who they actually were, because we always get it through the Greek lens, and we're like, who were these women?
Who were
They
the
had their own,
Trojans?
they had their own
Mhm.
culture, they had their own pantheons, they had their own gods, their own beliefs. And we know, like, our mothers, and like then later as that, like, we know these women and the spouses and all the children behind the walls experienced things in such a unique way, but that's something that we felt like we think that we can reach in there and tease out that story. That's the story we wanted to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see why you
It
were
was definitely
talking
very
about
personal.
Personal, yeah.
Yes, I can see why you were talking about writing it together for so long, because it sounds like it was something that, like, this is your story to tell almost. All the pieces and the experiences and the perspectives and the things that you've studied and the people that you've known have all kind of led you to being the right people for this. I mean, hopefully that is like, hopefully you feel that, there's something really powerful in kind of knowing that that's your contribution.
It's definitely our line, because we read all the other retellings and everybody does it in such their way. Like, there are a lot of the women who are classicists are writing from it from that perspective, and they're bringing to it that. But this is definitely the thing that we were like, okay, what is it that we can bring to it that maybe is
a little
unique
bit
to
different.
us?
Yeah.
Is unique to us.
Yeah, the Greek retelling of myths from a feminine perspective is definitely in. So
Yeah.
there's a little bit of luck in there too, but it sounds like there was
Yes.
no trend chasing, none of
No.
that. It was just this story of your heart, and it lined up really well with what people are asking for these days. So that's very, very
You
cool.
can never write to the market, as every writer knows, because it's changing fast for you to write to it. So
Yeah, unless you're just like, there's no hope of chasing
These are
all
two
that.
very long novels, so
Yeah.
that wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
Yes.
yes.
So I have some technical questions. Getting back to that co-writing aspect of things, just technically, how did that work? I know that there are people who, I draft and I edit, or I do this POV and I do this POV. What was your process for actually creating this novel together?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be completely frank, it was an evolving one. And it was one that I think we are both very independent and slight control freak type of writers.
So, most writers, I think.
Most writers are.
But it's hard not to be a
Just
little,
being real.
bit.
But the fact that we've known each other for so long, and that we have been best friends for so long, it was an undertaking that I know. I mean, I probably would only have ever undertaken it with her. And so everybody's co-writing experience is going to be different because of whatever the relationship is or your comfort level, and everybody brings different strengths. But as far as for us specifically, we each created voices, and then we thought it was going to be something that was more like balanced. But what it ended up being is this sort of collaborative bricklaying. Truly, we wanted to write in one voice. So we have different voices in it, and
different
so
characters,
POVs, but we wanted it to feel like this came from the mind of one writer, in the sense that the themes, all the things that we wanted to say. And we were so lucky because we set out wanting to tell the same story on every level, not just like the plot, but what does it mean, and like thematically and symbolically, all the things that we never had to plan them out. We felt very lucky; they just lined up, and that's what
And I think that's something, if another writer was going to try to co-write with someone, you wouldn't necessarily think about that. That wouldn't be the first thing you would think about, is our vision, for what the themes are, or what the story means, do those things line up? I think you would start thinking about, you're going to take this POV, I'm going to take this POV, here's the plot.
Yeah. Rise and fall.
Yeah. But that, and actually ended up being like a really important thing to have.
I mean, now that you mention it, I'm not surprised at all. You said that, and I thought, well, of course.
Yeah.
That informs, even subconsciously, the way that you're writing a story. This is what I'm trying to say.
And I could see how it could feel like, even if you technically, you finish the novel, it's brilliantly plotted. If you have two writers and they have two very different worldviews or visions, or it could just feel like disjointed, I think.
Kind of muddy.
So I think that was something that we were lucky that we kind of went into it sharing that. But also, I would just recommend, if anybody was going to try to co-write with someone, think about that first. Like, what not just, you know, who are the characters, what is the plot, but what are we trying to say in this story? What does it mean? As a way to kind of really create something that feels like it's solid, and there isn't that disjointed feeling.
One more thing that I was like, if anybody is thinking of co-writing, this is something that we learned, and we kind of had so we learned, we did some things instinctually, but we learned a lot of things the hard way. So we would love to share anything that we know that might help somebody. So, you know, even if you're writing, we have 4 different POVs. Even if you're writing with so many POVs, there is going to be a central trunk of your story, and it is going to be the center of the story. And nothing is ever going to be even. So I think starting off and knowing, you know, in each book that may be a different trunk if you're doing more than one book, but being in agreement and knowing what your anchor is, because then everything else, all the, you know, this is a terrible metaphor, I'm getting lost. Anyways, it's all coming off that trunk of the story. And I think you need to know what that is.
Yeah. We also learned, you know, we know each other's writing style really well, because we've been each other's critique partners, first readers for years. But like we learned, for example, like Danielle will write, her first draft is like where the magic happens, and she will like, everything will be poured into that first draft. Whereas I write very sparse first draft. And then I love revision because I like layering in things. So it was just a very interesting thing to learn, is like, okay, your chapters are 20 pages, mine are like 7. Like, what's going on here?
We think the same, but we work completely differently.
Yeah.
And that can work, and it can be such a strength too, because
but you just learn like each other's style, and like, okay, you're gonna get it all out in the first draft. It's gonna take me several drafts to like layer in who these characters are, what I want to say, like, so that was just an interesting thing to discover.
And we learned how, even though we had known each other for so long, if you're co-writing with somebody, you have to prepare to be extremely vulnerable, because people are seeing things as they're developing, and it can be a very raw process sometimes too, because especially if you're writing, like we were writing sort of the book of our hearts. So it's something that we were very, very tied to, and so you're really pouring your heart on the page, and you know,
you're seeing it without it being polished.
Without literally writing it down and being like, incoming, and like, oh man, you know. And it is also beautiful because of that, because it felt, I don't know, like when the magic happens, you can really, really feel it.
It's a neat experience.
So you didn't have any roles that you established so much. It was just talking through what happens next and sort of seeing who was best for that section. Am I kind of reading this?
We began by saying, okay, these are the voices, but then, and we each created different voices. But then what we realized is we have different strengths, and what we had to do is we had to be like, okay, we are now going to full on open to each other and be like, okay, this is this type of thing. Like, I think you would actually be better in this moment. And then, okay, you are actually going to be here. And then some things are like, oh, this is a tag team event. Like, this is something that I think identify.
It got very muddy. It got very muddy. Like, who wrote this chapter?
It's like,
well, I started writing it, but
this word is mine. Those 2 are hers. And it's like, but it's like such a cool.
And that wouldn't work for everybody. Like, we know of co-writing teams where like they each have their character and they write, you know, 2 POVs, and then it alternates, and they, you know, stick to it's very like, this is my chapter, this is your chapter, we go back and forth. And we kind of started out that way, but it did not end that way.
And there are parts that are just like, that are magic here, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that will never be touched because she did it, and that's perfect. Like, there are things that happen like that. But even people who stick to it so rigidly, I would just caution anybody who's thinking about co-authoring, that even if you're writing this character, your character is going to wander out of your chapter, and they're going to go into your co-author's chapter. And
that occurred to me as well. If you have your own point of view, or even your own character that you're in charge of, they're all over the book. They don't just stay in their own lane all the time.
Do what we want them to, you know.
Yeah, that's very true.
But we did have somewhat of a plan, so we knew where we were going. The big thing that we'll get to that. I think you might ask us about, what did we learn? What would we do differently? Also have answers for those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've already given some good tips for anybody who's thinking about co-authoring. Going back to some of those things that you said a little bit earlier about getting on the same page about the themes and the meanings and the trunk of the story and some of that. I was just thinking that's how you get a satisfying ending. You don't get a satisfying ending without
Yep.
kind of bringing all of that to a head. I tend to think a lot about like
Us
really
too.
nailing the ending because
Yeah.
it's one of the things that for me
Yeah.
is just a hallmark of some of my favorites. So that's
Yes.
Yes.
just not
Well,
something that I would necessarily think of if I were working with somebody else.
mhm.
So getting that all set up at the beginning, I think is some really great advice.
And I think that's what we always knew. Like we
Mhm.
were like I tend to be a little bit more of a plotter. She tends to be a little bit more of a pantser. Like we kind of worked we each alter, we each kind of changed our natural style to accommodate the other person a little
Mhm.
bit.
To make room. To
Yes,
make
we
room.
weren't rigid about that,
Yeah.
but we always knew what the ending was. And
Well,
we
we
were
knew we were
always writing towards that.
we just
So
didn't take a direct line there.
yeah.
I can appreciate a chaotic process.
Yeah.
My own process is relatively chaotic, and it's just me. So since you already brought it up, especially, what is something that you wish you'd known when you first started co-writing that you have not mentioned yet? Like, what have
Yeah.
you learned the hard way?
Many things, but just on a very practical, technical level, that it is possible to break Google Docs. That's
It's
um
very possible.
so these are we
Seriously?
wrote we
No,
wrote
yeah.
two very large, it was actually written as one novel originally.
First lesson learned.
Yeah, and so we ended up having to divide it into
Mhm.
two books that were almost 200,000 words each.
Mhm.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and so it was originally in one Google Doc, and we started to get to
Right.
the point where Google Doc was running out of memory, and it was like corrupting the file. So that was one thing we learned, is if you're going to write, because it's giving each other comments when you do like track
Mhm.
change
Right.
in comments in Google Docs. It takes up a lot of memory, and it
Mhm.
actually started to like corrupt the
Oh, yeah.
file. So we had to like break the book apart into smaller sections in Google Docs. So that would just be, if anyone else writes like fantasy or historicals that are very, very big,
Yep.
just
Right.
realize that, because that was our main tool. Like that's how we were
Yeah.
able to write simultaneously and write pretty quickly for,
Yeah.
how big of
Yeah.
an undertaking it was. We used Google Docs, and it was a great tool for co-writing, but we were like, okay, if we do this again, we will write in smaller files,
Yeah.
because that was a scary,
It was very
it's
scary.
very scary.
We
It
thought at one
is.
that it was just like, where did it go?
Did we lose the novel?
Will we ever be able to get back in? And you've saved previous versions, but who is that diligent
Yeah.
that they are backing up every time they sit down at the computer?
Yeah.
Not
Not every time, but
Yeah.
oh
yeah.
my gosh, that's stressful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that was one thing. And then I
Mhm.
think, just we obviously have a very close relationship and are very open with each other, but I think even when you know someone super well, you don't realize like how much you're going to need to communicate and
Mhm.
how honest you're going to need to
Mhm.
be,
Mm.
because even if you like feel so close that you're like sisters, like you have to be open about like when
You're insecure.
when you're insecure
Like,
or when you're stressed, or when you feel like something isn't working. And
Mhm.
Mm.
um yeah, so it's
Yeah.
just it is a constant like process of being very vulnerable and open with
Yeah.
each other
Or being
about-
like, I need 5 minutes to think about this.
Yeah.
Because
Mm.
sometimes, we all are busy when you're co-writing. We have a bunch of little kids between us. There's the time is not always equal, like the amount of time that we have to spend. Sometimes you just need to pause a little bit for you to figure out, what is, you need to be able to process things. And like, I think giving each other time
and space
and
to-
space to
yeah.
Mm.
process is also super important.
Yeah.
So
We
no
learned a
matter
lot about
how
communication.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
so no matter how you slice it, it sounds like you really have to trust the person that you're working
Yes.
with, because
Yep.
you do have to be like not only working together, but it's a really kind of like writing a book can be kind of yeah, very vulnerable, like intimate kind of thing almost.
Yep.
you know,
We
so
joke
yeah, that's
that we took each other's like husband's spots on the speed dial of our phone
We
because
totally did.
we were calling each other so frequently that
We were,
Yeah.
yes. And sometimes we were on Instagram, we were messaging on Instagram, texting, and on the computer in Google at the same time, but it's 3 different conversations about 3 different things. But like, you just like, yeah. So you have to be willing to be in constant communication with your partner.
Yeah. But trust, I think that is huge.
Mm. Yeah, and you guys live in different parts of the country now as well, which would provide an extra barrier potentially. I mean, I'm glad that I get to talk to you both at the same time now, but
Yeah, this was wonderful. Yeah.
But it was an excuse to get together a lot
Also.
too. So that was fun.
Work trips.
Work trips, yes.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. Work trips. That sounds nice. So you've talked about some of the challenges of co-writing. Obviously, you're really close and you have this product that you're really proud of, but there were some difficulties. What are some of the benefits that you would say to anybody who's considering co-writing? Maybe they have a project or a person or both in mind.
So I would say that, and I'll speak for myself, feel free to chime in, but it's the most rewarding thing that I've ever done, because not only do we get to do it together and, do something that I don't think either one of us could have done individually, but there are so many benefits. Writing is so solitary, right?
Yeah.
And anybody who does it knows that we spend so much time thinking about it. We want to talk about it. Nobody wants to hear us talk about it. Like, who wants to talk about a late Bronze Age collapse? I've tried it at a party. Nobody is interested in it. But to have that somebody that is like in there with you,
in that world,
to listen
there.
to you and care, like, because that's what they care too. It just makes you feel, it makes the process something that is like making art with somebody. I don't know, like people that do community. I don't know. It made it such a community thing, even though it's just 2 of us, community of 2. But it felt different than anything I've ever done before. It was amazing. And also, you share the burdens, but you share the joys, and that makes it. I feel like sharing the joys is even more significant than sharing some of the hardships, because everything was so much sweeter when it happened because we were doing it together. And I feel like being accountable to somebody, it makes you a better writer. It just will make you a better writer. You will never
grow so much.
You'll never dig into it the way that you'll do when you have somebody sitting right next to you, like, and you learn so much about yourself. I'm trying to think if there was another big one that I was like, oh yeah, did I tell them? What?
Yeah, well, we did. I think we learned a lot about our individual writing strengths, because when you're kind of going back and forth with somebody, and it's like a kind of a constant, you're comparing notes, and you're constantly, digging into this process together, and so you just learn a lot about, like, okay, this is what my strength is as a writer. Like, these are things I'm really good at, and this is something that you're is your strength, and so you can kind of come in and use that strength to make what I'm working on even better. Like, it's
oh yeah,
it's
capitalize on both, so you have like that. The possibilities for that are really exciting.
And just fun. Practically, I think, like, I mean, I had just had my second child when we started working on this. So I had a newborn. It was during COVID. Like, sometimes I don't remember how this happened, like, very practically speaking. I'm like, when did I work on this? But there's the sense of, like, somebody is waiting for the next chapter.
She had me breathing over her shoulder.
Yes. And so that like accountability, like, just you have like a fire to really sit down and do it. And I, like, there's no way, postpartum during COVID, I would have ever written anything
or
like
me.
this.
I had 4 kids at home that I was trying to, what is it?
Distance
learn.
Sorry, I'm a teacher. Yep.
So thank you for all that you do, for all that you have done. But it was just chaos, and it felt, there was it felt different. It felt like we were excited every time she sent me something. I was like, this is so exciting. And
you wanted to sit down and write the next thing you needed to write to respond to it. So I would say that that's a benefit, is just, it just gives you a lot of motivation.
That is really beautiful. I don't know exactly what I was expecting from a discussion about co-writing, I've just had a lot of curiosity because so many people have done
We're
it
doing it.
successfully, but
Yeah.
there doesn't seem to be any kind of formula for it. But
No.
it seems like it was a beautiful process for the two of you. So if I ever have the opportunity and the, yeah, good reason to do it, it seems like something
Yeah.
worth trying for sure.
Definitely.
Absolutely. And everybody, like, there right now, we actually we have actually spoken about co-writing before,
Like presented
presented
at like
on it.
writers workshops.
And it is interesting
Okay.
when you think about current trends in publishing. It's created, well, first of all, it's the first time we've ever been able to do it. But this is
With
what
have the technology, the
technology to do
tools
it.
to actually
To make it possible for two people to work on a project like that. And a lot of the ways, like how the sciences have changed to like the lone man on the mountaintop with a telescope. Now things are so much more collaborative, and I feel like with writing is one of those. Even the field of writing has been affected by this, but
yeah.
Yeah, I was going somewhere with that.
Well, it's just becoming it is becoming more popular, and I think it's because, like she said,
Oh, yeah.
we have the capability to actually like practically do it.
Mm-hmm.
But even, you share the marketing
Mm-hmm.
burdens. You
That would be nice.
yeah,
right.
For some, I don't think it would necessarily make everybody be able to write faster or to be able to write more books, but I think in our case,
That's
like
it. Yeah.
we were able to write quicker. So, if someone is especially, I know in indie publishing, like writing frequently is a pretty that's something that you want to be continually publishing, and so having a partner where you can
Yeah. Hi. Hi, Daniel. Go see Daddy downstairs. Go see your brothers. It was a matter of time.
told you. Yeah. So I would say, it's you share a lot of just the marketing.
Right. And the trends. This is what
Yeah.
see, this is how we work. We just came around the circle to come back to what I completely forgot in the beginning. The trends, like now people are very interested in like big fiction, dual POVs, complex books. And I feel like people can bring their own specialities to it, and it really is right for co-authors to come together and tackle some of these projects that maybe they would not feel as comfortable doing individually.
Yeah.
Well, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for just spilling your guts and answering all my questions. So I'm sure people are burning to know more about you and your book. At this point, your books, I guess, plural, since you do have your individual works as well. So how can people find you and your work online?
Well, we have a author website, adrhine.com, and that's a great place to find out everything about us. We are pretty active on Instagram under Rhine author. And we also have a pre-order giveaway going on at the moment. So
oh yeah,
she is sporting the one of our prizes.
It's
so
a
we
million
have
degrees. So I'm of course wearing a sweatshirt.
A sweatshirt, yeah. But
what does the sweatshirt look like? Can I see?
Oh yeah, it says "Every woman is a warrior," and it's got
the Trojan horse on the back. Yeah.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah,
I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No,
we're doing some fun giveaways, and
and we love to interact. So
yes,
we're readers first, and so we just really enjoy connecting with people that love the same things we love. So if anybody wants to find us on Instagram or ask us any questions or
interested in co-writing,
we're very
we can share our experiences in even more depth. Yeah,
because we were really lucky to have had people, mentor and guide us throughout, and just even be willing to share their experiences and like provide,
know what it's like to be in the trenches. Yeah.
So it's one of the things that we actually enjoy about social media.
Connecting with other writers and readers.
Yeah.
Well, I will put all of those links down below for anybody who is interested in following up and reaching out on Instagram or checking out that website. And with the all the pre-order goodies, I might check that out myself after we get off this call. But make sure to subscribe for more content like this. Like this video if you liked it, and I will see you next week. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank
Carly.
you.